Selfie stick, testing. All right, Andy Staples. Let's start off. Just plug your podcast right off the bat.
The Andy Staples
There
Show. I know what the initials spell. It's okay.
So we're just kind of chilling here. You've been waiting for Will Levis. You're trying to, talk to the Cats. I don't really talk to Will that much, but I think when you're looking from a Georgia perspective, and that's all I do, who's second in the East? And I can't help but get past those Wildcats.
It is a great question, and I think the who's second in either division question is the more interesting question in the SEC. But I'm with you on Kentucky. The consistency they've had under Mark Stoops, and then you look at their recruiting over the years. It is ramped up. They are in on better prospects. You look at who they're beating out for guys, and it gets better and better each year. Now, the one thing I worry about with them is losing Wan'Dale Robinson, because he was so much of their offense last year. And you go back to like the Florida game, he turns a very short pass into a huge play, and then because they're so good running the ball, because they're solid defensively, they just sort of take the air out of the ball the rest of the game. Can they do that this year? Are they going to have somebody who can make that play that gets them enough points to where they can just sort of sit back, let Chris Rodriguez run the ball, and run out the clock? Now, I will say with Levis, if you talk to the scouts,
they love him. They can't get enough of him.
The arm talent is there. So perhaps they just find that with a bunch of other guys.
Yeah.
And he's just distributing.
I look back to last season, and I know you can't really compare things like this game to game, season to season, but like when I look at Tennessee, Georgia had a flu game defensively.
Yep.
And they got Hendon Hooker benched in Knoxville.
Yeah.
And Kentucky came into Athens and kept it within like 7 or 10 points at halftime. So I look at the program. I know there's changes between both of them, forward or backward, but Kentucky looked more ready, I would say.
Well, I think Kentucky is further along in its evolution as a program. I think with Tennessee, we're going to need to see a little bit more, and Josh Heupel's probably going to need some more time to build that roster up defensively. Offensively, the system they run, if they got a quarterback, they're going to be able to move the ball on most teams. And I think Hendon Hooker is a very good quarterback for that offense. They actually have Joe Milton, who, if you watch Joe Milton in practice, you're like, this is the greatest quarterback I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But he tends to overthrow folks in the games, and Hendon Hooker does. And he does what you need to do. He gets the ball out on time. That works. But they're going to have to get better defensively. And that's where everything that happened at the end of the Jeremy Pruitt era and that mass exodus from the roster just kills them. Yeah.
Speaking of quarterbacks, Stetson Bennett, the talk of the day was his lack of respect. Kirby Smart was asked about it.
Of college football.
He really is. I think with all the quarterback rankings we see in the offseason, you can either rank quarterbacks like in a vacuum. How good are they? What kind of arm talent do they have? But you can also rank guys based on what they do in their system. I don't know if there's a better fit, or maybe it's all on Todd Monken, but Stetson and Todd Monken are like a match made in heaven.
They work great together, and I think here's all you need to know. For 2 years, they tried to find anybody but Stetson, and he kept being the best option. At some point, can we just admit he's good? I don't care about him as an NFL prospect. I realize if we ranked the players as NFL
that's
prospects,
all anybody cares about.
Like you're looking at Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, who's only started a couple games.
Right.
Wow, he's 6'5", he's 240, he can throw the ball a million miles an hour. It doesn't matter. Can you do what Stetson Bennett did at the end of the national title game? Can you drop the ball in the bucket when your team needs a score? That's what matters. And will Stetson Bennett be a successful NFL quarterback? I feel like I can go out on a limb and say no, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
His job is to win games at Georgia, and he seems pretty good at that.
Last one for you. Played ball at Florida. We're looking at the SEC realignment. By the way, everyone's forgotten about that in the landscape of NIL
scheduling
and the super conferences now. But when I look at Georgia, Florida has to stay on the schedule.
Absolutely.
I think, beyond that, Auburn has to stay on the schedule. If it's a rotation like that where there's a third permanent opponent, who do you want to see Florida play, and who do you feel like Georgia?
That's a really interesting question, because I think you actually have to do that with some competitive equity in mind. And there's one school I can point to in the SEC because they seem to be beloved as a rival by everyone. You could totally screw Auburn if you wanted to.
You could.
Because Auburn's going to have Alabama and Georgia. And if you wanted, like Florida would love to have an annual series with Auburn again. That was one of the fans' favorite series. I think LSU would probably enjoy playing them every year. Tennessee had an annual series with Auburn for decades before the divisional split. Everybody would love to play Auburn. But you can't do that to Auburn. Like, I think you have to give Auburn Vanderbilt.
I don't know. I think I'd be okay with that.
I'm aware of that. But yeah, he doesn't care for Auburn. But you got to give Auburn Vanderbilt because that you're killing them any other way. So same thing.
Auburn fans are like, yeah, that Vandy rivalry is our biggest rivalry.
Listen, they just want to go to Nashville every other year.
That's right.
They're fine with it. But for Georgia, you obviously do have to have Auburn and Florida. I would like to see South Carolina be their third. I think that would be fun. South Carolina will get up for that game. That'll be a massive game for them. When before South Carolina joined the SEC, when they would play Georgia, it was the biggest thing in the world. I remember early in their tenure in the SEC, the Brandon Bennett over the top between the hedges, that's a historical game for their program. So I think it would be good for both programs, neighboring states. I work with that. Florida, so they're going to have Georgia. The question is, do you have Tennessee? Because Florida-Tennessee is a rivalry.
I don't see how it works. When you look at the grid,
it's a product of the divisional split.
Because there's Vandy.
Yeah.
Tennessee's got to keep Vandy.
Exactly.
Because they're
and they got to keep Alabama.
They got to keep Alabama, and they got to keep Florida, I think, right? So
I think.
After that.
Yeah. Well, Florida. So you have Florida with Georgia and Tennessee. Do you keep LSU, which has been an annual rivalry for a long time?
Yeah.
They both hate each other, but not in the hate each other where they love to play each other. Like they hate playing each other too. Both schools would like to see that rivalry end. So that would be one where you can have some flexibility and maybe do something weird. Like give them Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want to see Florida Oklahoma every year?
The Stoops Bowl, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. All right, Andy. Thank you, man. There's a lot more going on in college football that we can't even begin to predict, but I think this is a good start.
I like it.
All right. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, let me